Everybody. Thanks everyone for joining us. And we're joined today by Yan Pritzker. He is the CTO and co-founder of Swan Bitcoin. He's also the author of Inventing Bitcoin. And for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Stephan Livera. I host a Bitcoin podcast, and I'm also at Swan. My role is as Swan Bitcoin International. So tonight we're gonna have a chat, and then we'll have a time for mingling as well. And also Yan has got some copies of Inventing Bitcoin, so he can sign some of those for you guys afterwards in the networking session for us. And we'll also give you guys time for questions as well if you've got questions for any of us. Do you have anything you want to add there?
No, other than I'm very happy to be here and joined by my friend and awesome podcasting person, Stephan Livera. He is the best. If you guys don't know his podcast, I really recommend just listening to everything from like beginning to end, because it was probably one of my biggest influences when I was getting into Bitcoin, was listening to that stuff, and especially on the Austrian economic side. If you're like a technical person, you understand Bitcoin from that side, but don't have a strong econ background, really recommend checking out Stefan's episode where he actually does like a solo intro to Austrian economics. One of the best, at least for me, was one of the best resources.
Thank you, yeah. So for anyone interested, that's episode 71 on my show. So let's hear a little bit from you about how did you get orange pilled? Like, what was your journey of learning about Bitcoin? I think it might be informative for people out there.
Yeah, so my journey was pretty winding. It's probably the case for a lot of folks. And I first was exposed to Bitcoin on Slashdot in 2011, where I kind of like read about it for 5 minutes and thought, okay, it's an interesting new open source payment thing. And I ended up buying some at like $30. It went down to $2. I sold out of it and said, I'm stupid, this is ridiculous, and I don't know what I'm doing. And basically forgot about it. And then 2013, I was kind of like saw it in the media again and started checking it out again and realized the price was now $1,000. So I said, okay, maybe something interesting is going on here. Still didn't understand what it was. Ended up buying some on Coinbase. And then basically, again, forgot about it. I'm a startup person, so I do startups for my living for the last 20 years. So I've been doing, I work day and night on this stuff, and I just don't have time to like learn about weird magic internet money. And that's, I think, the case for a lot of people. And so I kind of dismissed it. And it wasn't really until 2016 when a friend of mine told me to start checking out. Actually, he told me to look at Ethereum, which is how I came back to Bitcoin. So he said, look, check out this Ethereum thing. People are building all kinds of decentralized applications on it, and it's really interesting. And I'm a tech person, so of course I said, this is cool. You can build a bank. You can build your own coin. So I started researching that and spent probably like 6 or 8 months on the Ethereum side of things, and then started like alarm bells went off for me, and like, hey, this is kind of similar to Bitcoin. And I started researching Bitcoin again, and I actually came across Andreas Antonopoulos' video from 2016 called Currency Wars, where he basically like explained all the problems in the world with currency and other countries, and he talked about Greece and Cyprus and Turkey and places like that were experiencing real issues, whether it be inflation, whether it be government control of how much money you can withdraw from an ATM, or in India where they made certain banknotes illegal overnight. And so when he started talking about that, I kind of had the light bulb of, wait, this is not a payment network at all. This is a new form of money, and it has a property which is really interesting in that nobody can control it. You can literally, like, if you want to leave a country with Bitcoin, just remember your seed phrase and walk out, right? And that was a huge revelation for me because I'm from the former Soviet Union, and my parents immigrated here, and I immigrated here when I was 7 years old. So I went home and, like in my mid-30s was like, hey, what happened with our immigration process? Like, what happened to our money when we left the Soviet Union? And they said the government allowed us to exchange $100 worth per person. And I said, what? So they're like, yeah, we had to leave the country with $400 in our pocket because that's all the government would let us take. And I said, holy shit, that's what Bitcoin is about. That's the point of Bitcoin, right? It's the point of not having the Soviet Union happen again. It's the point of having, freedom with your money and freedom with your wealth, which creates this kind of portability of people, right? You can now leave if you don't like something, which is really not a possibility for many, like, billions of people in this world. So that's when I got really into it and started just, reading everything I could get my hands on for a number of years. And until I built up enough conviction to like leave my job and work on Bitcoin.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think it really, no matter what your profession or expertise is in, there'll be something you need to learn when you're coming into Bitcoin. And so that's why when I'm teaching Bitcoin, I'll frame it as monetary technology. But you need to know a combination. It's not just economics, because some of the people who knew economics went down the wrong pathway. And then it's not just technology, because you actually need a combination of these things. And that's why it's so important to find the right people when you're first coming into this. Because if you find the wrong people, they'll send you barking up the wrong tree. And that will waste a lot of your time. And so that's something we constantly wrestle with in the space. And that's why those of us who want this thing to happen sooner, well, we're trying to get out there and put this educational material out there. So I guess, so back to you, Yan. How do you see things now in terms of confusion in the space? And do you think there'll be a lot more confusion still to come out there in the masses who haven't sort of learned the message from the clarified source?
I do think there's a certain personal journey. I think everybody I talk to who's come to Bitcoin, I mean, there are certain rare exceptions where somebody's just recognized Bitcoin right away for what it was. Maybe they had the right combination of factors. They knew enough technology, enough economics, enough of all these subjects. For me, I didn't really know any economics going into Bitcoin. I didn't know any monetary history. Didn't understand what money was. Never asked the question. And I think most of those people will get led astray. And it's still common today, right? I think as we move forward with Bitcoin and create more education, and we see what works, what doesn't work, what sticks, how people react to things, we start to create clarity. And like a good example is Michael Saylor from MicroStrategy, who bought billions of dollars of Bitcoin. He studied Bitcoin for like 6 months, right? He said he got quarantined, started reading about Bitcoin, and he built up enough conviction over 6 months that he started buying billions of dollars worth of it. In fact, taking out loans to do so. And so he got there really quick. For a lot of people, it takes years or wandering the wrong path. I mean, I spent a good 8 months to a year on Ethereum and ICOs and all kinds of other junk, right? And I think the lure of making quick money is also very strong, and it's fundamental human psychology. If you're given the option to gamble and like make 500x gains, people will want to take that option, even if they realize that the reality is like most likely they're going to lose money. So I think we're going to keep seeing these cycles where people are coming in, they learn about Bitcoin, and a lot of people learn about some, like Shiba or some other crazy meme coin first, and then because they're just gambling and trying to make money, and then all of a sudden they realize there's this whole world of crypto, and then they realize beyond crypto, it's not just crypto, there's Bitcoin, and then there's like gambling. So, which is what we're trying to explain to people, but it's difficult, right? So not everybody makes that leap, and I really do think that if you study monetary history, if you study economics, if you study technology, it's very difficult to like embrace these other things that are going on that are outside of Bitcoin. You start to see clarity. But I also think a very small number of people actually have the combination of factors to make it there. So, I think it's up to us to try to condense information as much as possible and get as much clarity on it as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, in fairness as well, I think you came in at a time that was a bit earlier and the material was not as condensed, right? Michael Saylor had the benefit of seeing, the Bitcoin Standard and all these books and podcasts and Twitter and all these books and articles, and Vijay Boyapati's article, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, as another example. And I think no matter how good we get at education and marketing as well, I think sadly, well, not sadly, but it's just, there is that factor of just number go up, right? And as we speak right now, we hit an all-time high just recently around $67,000 for one Bitcoin. And so it's funny that despite all of our best intentions, sometimes the price moving up is really what pulls a lot of people in. Yeah, and then what I've seen historically as well is that sometimes people come in because the number go up, right? And then what happens is a bunch of them get, like after a big drop, a bunch of people are sitting there wrecked, right? They're like, oh, what the hell? I put in, 50,000 and now it's down to 20,000, right? Just picking random numbers. And only then do some of those people actually stop to think, wait a minute, what did I just buy? What is this thing that I just learned about? Do you have anything to add there? Yeah.
No, I think that's very accurate. And I think also that what I'm seeing on Twitter, like I'm on Facebook trying to convince, there's a small contingent of people that are still on Facebook, which is really weird. There's like I have like 3 or 4 friends the only people I ever comment on anything on Facebook. So I go there and I'm like aggressively trying to get these 3 or 4 stragglers over. And recently I was actually successful in like one of my best friends, who for 5 years has been resisting buying Bitcoin, is now saying he's going to buy some for his kid, which I said for his college. I said, great, amazing. But it takes a really long time, and it actually takes longer with people who are smart. I think people who are smart, and there's a great article called like Why the Yuppie Elite Dismiss Bitcoin, which I think is worth reading and understanding, because my friends are the yuppie elite, okay, 100%, okay? And so when I talk to them, it's like, well, isn't it this, and isn't it that, and isn't it a Ponzi scheme, and why this, and why that, right? There's a lot of questions, and they're not bad questions. They're questions asked by smart people because they have developed a very sensitive filter to scams, and they know what things, what scams look like. But unfortunately, it triggers the wrong things when people, look at something and it's like, wait, it's not backed by the government? It's a scam. Okay, why is that the case, right? Asking those fundamental questions that people have certain expectations about, I think, is what drives those points home. And so that's the kind of education I think we all need to be doing. And those of us who understand Bitcoin here, we need to be going out on our channels, in person, whatever it is, talking to your friends, and making them ask the hard question of like, why? Why does money have to be backed by the government? Why is that the case? What does the history of money look like? What did we have 70 years ago? How was it different from what we have today? Those questions are not questions that most people have answers to, but they have assumptions because they just have lived in a particular type of environment, and they know, what fiat cash looks like, and they are comfortable with it, especially in America, where they don't really have problems. Like, we don't really get censored for our transactions for the most part, unless you're, of course, like your cannabis business, then you understand what the problem is. Most people don't, right? So you have this additional challenge selling Bitcoin in an environment where money isn't really that broken. It's much easier to sell it in Argentina or Venezuela, where money is, like, you can see that it's broken. Here, I think you have to look much closer.
Yeah. Nevertheless, though, it does seem that, at least in my experience, even chatting with Uber drivers and just people around, more and more people are becoming more aware of these questions in the recent years. 2020 and 2021 have really changed things for a lot of people. They've now started to seriously think about this question of inflation and is it really going to be transitory, right? So I guess that is the question. So Yan, do you have any thoughts on the transitory inflation?
I mean, yeah. I wrote an article in April of 2020, and I don't want to toot my own horn because I was so smart, because I don't think it's that you don't really require a lot of smarts to have seen what was coming, right? In April 2020, right after the Corona thing hit, I wrote an article and I said, here's what's going to happen. They're going to print a ton of money. They're going to do helicopter money drops. Inflation's going to go up. Bitcoin's going to go up. It's like really, really, I'm sure, most of us in this room who are, into Bitcoin probably saw the same thing. And yet you had like mainstream economists saying, no, everything's going to be fine. There's no inflation, blah, 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 right? And yet the rest of us are like, this is really obvious. When you print a ton of money, what happens to prices? Like, somehow, when you get into like higher orders of economic thought, all of a sudden supply and demand doesn't matter, because supply and demand is very complicated and there's all this stuff. And yeah, you don't understand. They're not actually printing money. They're actually doing this fancy thing called QE, which is not really money printing. Okay, what is the actual result? People have more money in their pockets. They're going to go out to the store and they're going to put it into either the goods or they're going to put it into the stock market. Okay, the wealthy people are putting it into the stock market. The poor people are putting it into goods. It's really, really simple, right? And it's almost coming at it from like a beginner's mind. Because for me, like, my economics understanding is like 101 level, right? I listen to Stephan's Austrian Econ Primer. That's it. I know everything I need to know, right? Supply and demand, individual action. That's what it all comes down to. And it's really simple, okay? Give people free money. What are they going to do with it? They're going to spend it, or they're going to stick it into an asset and inflate the cost of that asset. Lo and behold, S&P is at all-time highs. We have inflation in goods. Okay, everybody could obviously see this coming, and yet all of the literati and the intelligentsia of our world said, no, this is not going to happen. So there's like a fundamental disconnect there. I don't think the inflation is transitory. I mean, there's tons of money that's been created just because it's sitting on the sidelines and maybe the low velocity, meaning it's not actually low velocity. It's sitting in the stock market. You can see, what's happening in Tesla stock, right? But the truth is, like, it's out there, right? The money's there. It's not going to go away. There's no takebacks. So how are you going to tell me that this is transitory? It just doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't pass the smell test.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that point you were making, that they can't just take that money back. They're not just going to unprint it. So it remains printed, for better or worse. It's out there. And so I love the framing of my friend and the great Pierre Rochard, savings technology. I think that is the best way to think of Bitcoin. And that is such an important thing. So something to think about when you're talking to your friends and family about Bitcoin. Don't frame it as invest in Bitcoin. Frame it as save with Bitcoin. And of course, I understand people are starting, when they're starting, maybe it's a little bit harder for them to make that leap of understanding. But if you can use that word save in Bitcoin, savings is Bitcoin, over time, they'll start to cotton on to that idea. Now, another interesting article by Parker Lewis, and he wrote this on his blog, Gradually Then Suddenly, it's called The Great Definancialization. And basically, it's just what you were saying, Jan, that a lot of assets are now treated like savings in a loose sense. People will try to save into the stock market, or they'll save into property, or or if they listen to the NPC financial advisors, they'll say, oh, go 60-40 stocks and bonds, right? As though we should be putting 40% of our investable assets into bonds, negative yielding. It's crazy. And so the other point that you were mentioning there, Jan, is just that it's trust in the system, right? And so I think this is the point that Croesus was hitting on in that article. So that article is called Why the Yuppie Elite Dismiss Bitcoin. And part of that is, do you have high trust in the system, or do you have low trust in the system? So the point he was making is that it wasn't so much about how intelligent you were, right? So he made like a matrix, right? And the part of the idea is, even very highly intelligent people, as I'm sure many people here in this room, you probably have highly intelligent friends who don't understand Bitcoin because they have very high trust in the system. They believe the things that have been told. And so there's a lot of obfuscation out there by financial press, fiat economists, central banks, government politicians. They are just selling you lies, constantly selling you lies about inflation. And it just seems so crazy that people just keep believing it. Why do they it's like they just keep saying, this is the true science, inflation is okay. And now, we are now starting to see the flip to the argument of inflation is good. So what do you think about the argument of inflation is good?
I mean, it's the only argument left to make now that we can't take it back. So now it's good. It means our economy is recovering, right? I mean, you can take anything and you can twist it around, but I think what it comes down to is the view of sort of the mainstream media and various top-down analysis of the economy, where you look at something like the CPI, right? The CPI tells you, okay, what is the average person spending on an average basket of goods? Nobody in this room is average. Nobody here actually buys that basket of goods, right? So what they're actually doing is they're creating a model of something that doesn't actually exist, and they're turning it into one number, and they're saying, okay, this number represents that we're going to be okay. We're going to be fine. It was 2%, okay, now it's 5%, still fine. But the lie that they're telling there is that nobody is average, and nobody buys that basket. Everybody has their own little, assortment of things and goods and services they want, and those goods and services all have their own inflation vectors that are completely unrelated to this number that they made up, right? And this is Michael Saylor actually does a really great job explaining this too. But that's kind of one of the ways, and I don't attribute it to malice. I don't think the government's out there trying to lie to us. You can certainly take that view. I think of it more like this is the only thing they can do. They have a system. They look at it as a system. They can analyze the system, and they can draw models and create numbers from them. But they don't look at it as individual action because there's no possible way they could. They can't go around and poll everybody. Hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? How's your savings? You investing anything? You saving anything? Are you okay with your milk purchase price? They can't do that. So they have to make models. They have to condense things down to a single number. They have to make decisions off of that. I think that's the fact that they have to do that is, there's a fundamental flaw in the system where we're giving humans the power to create a policy based on a number which doesn't represent reality, right? So we're giving them that power, and now all the tools that they have are just like this one number. So we're going to try to make the number go up or down. And that's where the problem is to me, is we can't ever, no matter if they were the most well-meaning, most intelligent people on the planet, they could not make those decisions correctly. That's not the right system. The system that matters is that of individual choice, which is Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin does not allow some entity to come in and say, oh, we're going to reprice everything because we're going to change the interest rate. We can't do that in Bitcoin. You don't get that, and you don't get any bailouts. So if your business is doing poorly, you're going to go under. If you didn't think about saving, you're going to go under. You know, if you're taking on debt you can't sustain, you're going to go under. Those are not things that our modern economy allows for, and so, you know, we get this perpetuated cycle of things just being done wrong, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. And the thing with CPI is maybe there's not really even a fair way you could do it. And don't forget, there is the concept of hedonic adaptation. So they'll say what you might have 30 or 40 years ago, you might have been buying prime rib or, you know, ribeye steak, and now that's downgraded because people can't afford that. Now they're buying ground beef instead. And what's happened is you've actually had a qualitative downshift in what you're actually getting. Or in other words, or another way to think of it is like shrinkflation, right? That bag of chips that you're buying or whatever you're buying, it's become cheaper now. It's not what it was. So that's another way to think about that, to sort of attack that. And don't forget also, who has an incentive to tell you about these CPI numbers? Well, if you are in the normal sort of financial management world, you benefit from this high inflation because now your hurdle rate that you have to hit is effectively lower, right? You might only need to hit 6% returns because in real terms, it's actually lower than that, right? Even if you've nominally hit 6% or 8% or whatever it is, the actual real return is actually a fair bit lower than that because of inflation. And so people have an almost this perverse incentive to maintain the system that it currently is. And that's why, in many ways, it's difficult to teach someone Bitcoin when they're already a part of that world. And so that's why it's really funny as well when you get these news journalists who go and ask, say, a central banker what they think about Bitcoin, or they'll go ask some big banker what they think about Bitcoin. It's like asking the horse manufacturer or the horse breeder what they think of cars, right? It's like, it's just the wrong way to think about it. So bringing it to, I guess, the Bitcoin industry and the you know, crypto industry, although I loathe that word and I think it's Bitcoin, not crypto. I think that's something where maybe there's positives and negatives there, obviously being part of a Bitcoin-only brand with Swan and part of the broader ecosystem of Bitcoin-only. How do you think about that, you know, being Bitcoin-only? What are some of the benefits and maybe what are some of the challenges of that compared to the crypto?
Yeah, well, I think we had a thesis around, you know, launching this business. It was first and foremost, it was a moral choice to launch, you know, a Bitcoin-only business because we didn't have a place where we could send friends and family. I'm not going to send my friends and family to a place that's going to sell them garbage and create, you know, crypto day traders, because most people don't have any business doing day trading, in the stock market, let alone in crypto. So we created Swan for that reason. But besides that, we had this thesis that if you're focused on one thing, right, if you're focused on just Bitcoin, then you can have better education, you can have better conversions, you can have better customer support costs, you can have, everything can be more narrow and more tight and more focused. So you benefit from being really, really focused, and you can create a nice user experience, just kind of like the Apple approach of, you know, it just does this one thing, right? So that's why we went that route, but also, of course, for the moral reason that we don't want to create gamblers out of our friends and family. I do think the crypto ecosystem has a really good marketing engine, and there's lots of money there, and there's lots of, you know, money to be made in the gambling world, right? There's lots of money to be made in creating high-frequency traders, and that they're going to trade all day. You earn fees on every trade. You don't care if they get wrecked or not. We care. We care about our customers, and we want to create savers. We really think that going back to like the fundamentals of what creates a good society is going back to saving, right? And to your point of like Bitcoin is savings, or Pierre's point perhaps, I think this is lost art. I think most of us in this room grew up with an idea. We were always taught by our parents or by our schools that you save, you put away money, and then you get the thing that you wanted because you've saved for it, right? But we've also created a monetary system that doesn't allow you to save unless you stick it into stocks, which is speculation, because you don't know what you're doing. Are you a stock investor? Are you analyzing those stocks? No, of course not. You're just sticking them in some kind of index fund where you assume somebody else has done the work, except for they haven't either, because there's just robots doing all of it now. So now we're all in this, like, we're all investing in the same thing, the S&P. It's going up. Everybody's having a good time. But we don't have saving anymore. We don't think about savings. We don't think about deferred gratification, which is what I try to teach my children. And it's damn near impossible, right? So, like, there's this famous marshmallow test they do on kids where they say you get one marshmallow now or you get 2 marshmallows later. And we teach this to kids, right, that this is a good thing, but then we don't make the money in a way that makes that possible. you used to be able to give people a bond, right? And like, this is your bond, you get this, on your birthday, and then in 30 years, if you wait long enough, that bond's gonna be worth a lot. Well, that's not the case anymore. These bonds are junk. There's no faith in them, and the interest rates are negative. So you might get your money back, but it's not worth anything anymore. So you're not really saving. So I think we've lost that art, and that's why creating a Bitcoin-only business and creating a savings-focused business specifically around constant accumulation is really important. But even beyond that, I would say, I start to think about the analogy of Bitcoin like the internet. Like, it's a network, right? It's a network that more and more people are joining every day, and it's a network that will keep growing forever. There's no upper bound to it. There's going to be more people born onto this planet. They will all be onboarded into Bitcoin. So there's no upper bound on its growth. So, when is a good time to start saving in Bitcoin? Any time is good. Did I miss the boat? Should I have bought more in 2011 at $30? Yeah, I should have, but I wasn't smart enough back then. But I'm smart enough now, and now I'm humble enough that I'll buy it at any price, right? Because I'm not buying Bitcoin. I'm converting my money to the future money that my children will use, right? I know the world that they're going to be born in, or not born into, they're already born, but the world they will grow up in will be a world of Bitcoin. Like, that's very, very clear to me. It's going to be open source money. It's going to be programmable. It's going to have a way of holding its value. So that's what we have to all be doing, right? Whether you have kids now or in the future, hopefully you're thinking about them when you're putting away that Bitcoin and not looking to, make a quick buck and get out.
Yeah, I love that. And it's just in the Bitcoin world, there's a lot more focus on this idea of low time preference, thinking of the future, and your children are a reflection of that. So that's a very important part. I think for probably many people in the room, they might be holding Bitcoin or saving into Bitcoin themselves, but they might have friends who are, they talk to them and they're all talking about the latest dog coin or the latest, whatever. Is there any hope for them? Is there anything you can say to help them, or is it just, are some people just going to have to learn the hard way?
There is hope. I mean, look, when I got into this ecosystem for the first time and I found out about Ethereum and ICOs and stuff like that, I day traded crypto. I'm not ashamed of it. Like, I saw a system where I thought I was smart enough to take advantage of it. I said, okay, I'm going to try to make some money on it. Before I understood what money was, I was trying to make dollars, right? Not Bitcoin, let's be clear. I was not denominating my gains in Bitcoin, which is mistake number one. Because now I realize on the other side of that trade is a much smarter person who is denominating their gains in Bitcoin, and they are taking me to school, right? I mean, look, people are going to trade. We can't stop that. The stock market is there for fun for a lot of people, right? Penny stocks exist, and they will exist in perpetuity, and so will crypto coins. And there's 13,000 of them, and there will soon be 1 million. It's not going away. But I think there's hope when people start to touch these systems because they've now tasted this idea that, hey, these things exist outside of the normal financial system. And that's already a big leap forward because a lot of people don't even know there's anything outside. So once you see the outside, then it's just more of a question of, well, what are you looking at? And that's when we have to really we have to repeat this over and over and over. Like, okay, you went up 500x, just make sure you know when you get out. And when you get out, convert it to Bitcoin because that's your savings. That's the most important thing we can tell people like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also, for the aspiring altcoin traders that might be, your friends and family, I think a lot of them don't realize that crypto to crypto is a taxable event. And so this is sadly one of the lessons that some people learned in 2017. So some people were trading around between these coins, and because, as you might recall, if you were around then, or you might have looked back on the charts, that big drop happened in basically end of 2017, and then over 2018 was a big bear cycle. A lot of people ended up owing more taxes than they actually had because of all the crypto to crypto trades. So while some of your trader friends might think they're ahead, after taxes, after accounting for liquidity, after accounting for all of these aspects, they may not be that much in the green as what they think they are. So that's an important point just to remember there. Now, when it comes to saving in Bitcoin, we have to make that decision. How much should we allocate? How much should we put into this thing? And so I guess what I've found is that people tend to increase their allocation over time as they learn more. But how should people think about that? Let's say somebody is new, they're just starting in saving with Bitcoin. How should they think about that allocation question?
It's an interesting question because my answer to it has changed over the years as my own conviction built, right? So I used to say, put 1% of your net worth into it because it's not a number that's going to make a material impact. If you lose it, no big deal. And at least you'll have something, and it'll be, it'll be enough to probably hold you over, right? I really have changed my stance on this, and I went from somebody who believed that, like just buy 1% and sit on it and don't worry about it, to somebody who started thinking, especially when the Corona stuff happened and the money printing started happening, I started shifting my view because before what was pretty much theoretical, like we're building a stash just in case something happens, it was no longer theoretical. I think what happened in the last year is very practical. It's a very practical demonstration of everything that Bitcoiners have been warning about for many years. It just happened really, really fast and all at once. And it's basically, woke everybody up, right? So now you're like, okay, I don't have a way to save money. The dollar is not a good store of value. Like, very clearly it's not. And people who are smart in this world, I mean, like, people with a lot of money are realizing that, right? And they're coming and, to Swan and other companies like ours, and they're saying, okay, how can I convert my corporate treasury to Bitcoin? Why are they asking that question? It's because they see that Bitcoin is a superior store of value for the long run. So, to me, I started thinking about it less about, okay, allocate 1%, but more like, how much should you be allocating on an ongoing basis? In other words, how much of your current paycheck, let's say you get a paycheck, or let's say you have dividends from whatever, how much of that should be converted to Bitcoin? And the answer started shifting from 10%, 20%, all the way up to 90%. To where my answer now is, I don't see why you would not just convert everything to Bitcoin because it's a better store of value. So keep in fiat money what you need to pay the bills. And that answer is different for everybody, right? Like, you might not have a lot of money to save, or you might have a ton of extra wealth sitting on the sidelines. You could be on any side of that spectrum. But to me, it's like, this is the new money, right? This is the internet. So it's almost like saying, how many of my computers at home should I connect to the internet? I don't know, all of them? Because, except for the one that has your Bitcoin on it, I guess, right? Like, there are reasons not to connect computers to the internet, but generally speaking, they're a lot more useful if you do, and you can unlock a lot of value and a lot of power by doing that. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin, right? By turning your money into Bitcoin, you can unlock a lot of power and a lot of value. You unlock savings for yourself. You unlock programmability into the future. You may participate in Lightning Network and become more sort of, go down deeper into the technical side of Bitcoin and how it works and how to run it, and things like that. And so you create an option for yourself into the future. So that answer for me does change, and to the point where I feel uncomfortable telling people, like, yeah, I don't really keep that much fiat on hand. I just pay the bills. The rest of it goes into Bitcoin because that's saving. And that level of comfort builds up only from doing it for a long time and living through bear markets and living through drawdowns and all this kind of stuff until the point where you just don't care about the dollar value of it. You're like, this is my Bitcoin. I don't care about the dollar value because I know that it can buy me a house in the future, or a car, or an education for my kids, or the option to leave this country, right? It's a really, really big option. So I think everybody should be converting as much as possible of their paycheck into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think it's quite well said, because ultimately people increase their allocation to Bitcoin as their conviction rises. And often what happens is there's this like virtuous cycle, right? As you learn, you end up seeing more and more why you think Bitcoin is maybe not inevitable, but just under inevitable, basically. You start thinking more and more like that. And so for someone who's been in the space for a relatively longer period of time, I've been through big drawdowns, but I just believed fundamentally in the value of this thing. And so I think it comes down to buy as much Bitcoin as you are convicted to hold for the long term. And then that's the approach. And so typically people might say they might start out with a lump sum purchase, right? They want to take an initial allocation, and then they set up their ongoing Bitcoin savings plan, right? So that's kind of the typical approach that people take when they're getting into it. And then what happens over time is, as their conviction grows, they might get other lump sums of money and then just put all that in as well. So that's been the story. But you might have even seen this play out in the news as well, with people like, say, Paul Tudor Jones, right? Investors worship him and look up to him. He put in, I think in 2020, he publicly came out saying, oh, I've put a 1% allocation into Bitcoin. And then in 2021, guess what? He said, now 5%. 5% into Bitcoin. And so just over time, it just rises as the knowledge and the conviction grows. So that's another factor to think about there. But I guess we do also have to, of course, it's fun and all-time high right now, but how do you think about dealing with a bear cycle and dealing with drawdowns? Because, that could come.
Well, one of the things that I've really started doing a lot recently is reading like Bitcoin writers. I think the ecosystem is very interesting because a lot of people look at Bitcoin and they're like, this is like a stock. I can buy some, it goes up, it goes down, I make money, I don't make money. And then I expose them to like Alan Farrington's writings, for example. Bitcoin is Venice, really great article. This guy's like pretty much a poet, right? Like he's like a philosopher poet, right? So you read this article and you're like, why are people writing poetry and philosophy about something that's basically a number? So it's very strange, right? Why are people expounding on monetary history and making parallels about empires and like, why is this happening? And you start to see like, okay, Bitcoin is not just a number, it's a culture. It's got writers, it's got historians, it's got mathematicians, it's got developers, it's got economists. And all of these people who've spent thousands, tens of thousands of hours studying this topic, really, really smart people, producing really, really, really great content, they're telling you something. They're telling you that there's more to this than a number. Nobody's writing these polemics on Tesla, okay? Well, maybe a few people, I don't know. But this is more than a stock, right? This is more than a number. It's something else. It's a community. It's a generational change in how we think about money. The world is changing around us, right? So I actually have been spending more time on those articles and sharing those with my friends in order to show them, like, this is not just, I'm not trying to get you to invest in something. I'm trying to get you to understand there's a huge cultural shift going on, a huge shift in the how we think about everything, and you're missing out on it. Like, that's why I'm here for Bitcoin. It's not because I want to get rich. I had a startup acquisition. I'm doing okay. I'm not here for money. I'm here because I think the interesting cultural aspects of Bitcoin are so strong that it is going to last generations. This stuff is really the stuff of that gets passed down, right? And I think it's really important, especially when you're living through those drawdowns, to really go back to the fundamentals, understand why this culture is so strong. Why are articles like, one of my favorite things, go to Nakamoto Institute, which is Pierre Rochard's website and Bitstein, and they have articles from 2011, 2012, 2014, where they basically just straight up called it. They explained everything that was going to go down. They called it when Bitcoin was $1 billion. And to have that level of conviction, you go back and read that stuff in 2014, where Bitcoin was an absolute joke in 2014 to most people. And these guys said, this is what's going to happen. Speculative attack on the dollar. Exactly what Michael Saylor's doing. Interest rates are going to be low. People are going to borrow dollars. They're going to buy Bitcoin. Exactly what people are doing now. Coinbase just released a feature where people could do this. There's Unchained Capital. People are borrowing against their Bitcoin. These things are happening. The shift in money is happening. So these guys nailed it in 2014, and it's amazing because they were kids. I mean, they were in their early 20s, and they nailed it because they came at it with beginner's mind, and that's what I try to give to my friends now. I'm trying to tell them, hey, you have all this knowledge built up about how this current system works. Reset all that, throw it away, read this stuff by these kids who came in 2014 and understood it, and figure out why you don't get it today when they got it in 2014 and they nailed it, right? I think that's the kind of stuff that we share during bear markets to show people that it's not about the number. It's about the culture and what we're building here, and it's the future of money, and not just the money. It's the future of society, because society is so shaped by how we think about this money.
Yeah, excellent. And so people get very focused as well on like, oh, see, the number is going up and everything, or they get very focused on the Western world. And I can tell you, there are lots of other countries in the world where there are millions of people who are using Bitcoin day to day to transact, whether that's cross borders. Let's say you're a person in Nigeria and you're running a business and you're paying your supplier over in China. There are examples of people day to day using that right now. Or there are examples of people in South America using, let's say, gift card vouchers and Bitcoin, or using peer-to-peer Bitcoin trading to be able to send money home to their family. And so there are millions and millions of people out there in the world using this technology in the way that we say it's permissionless. We're not asking for permission. People who use Bitcoin in that fully sovereign way, they don't need to stop and ask. They just use it. And so that's an important aspect of the technology, and you can sort of focus on that and even see that, okay, obviously right now we're at all-time highs, right? But even before this, there were times where there were people transacting and the peer-to-peer volume in some of these other markets around the world, in South America, in Africa, was even greater than it was back in 2017. And so you can sort of see that there's real world use, although, of course, I think the main use is the savings technology aspect, but that's also just an interesting point there to think about. So, Jan, what about career risk? Did you think this was like, doing joining this Bitcoin thing did you perceive that as a career risk? Did you think, okay, it's like high risk, high reward, or what was your mindset there?
Yeah, so my history was in the startup world. I was working in startups ever since high school and college, so 20 years plus. And when 2018 rolled around, I felt pretty good about myself. My Bitcoin was doing really well. So I said, I'm going to quit my job, right? I'm going to go work on Bitcoin. And the thing is that at that time, it did feel super weird, right? It was not yet common for people to like quit their job and work on Bitcoin. It started happening around 2017 when everybody got, quote unquote rich, at least on paper, right before the thing started crashing, which is what happened to me, right? I got really rich on paper, I left my job, and then immediately the market just tanked, and I was like, okay, I'm no longer rich. However, I still like Bitcoin a lot, and I want to try to work on it. And I think it's really, really important, right? The reason I left Reverb, which was my prior startup, and it was doing really well, was because I wanted to focus on Bitcoin, because I think Bitcoin is the most important technology for humankind, right? I wanted to work on important problems. I don't see any more important problem to work on than Bitcoin. So I left with that amount of conviction and not that much money to sustain myself, but I figured, okay, I have like a year, figure this out. I can find a job, I can consult, whatever. So I wasn't too worried. I'm pretty experienced, and I knew I could get a job again if I wanted to. But what was weird is that at that time, I started giving talks at high schools, and I showed up at this first high school, and I said, hey, I'm like a startup entrepreneur, and by the way, I work on Bitcoin, and sort of try to like ease into it. And then the next year, I came in and I said, I no longer had a job, so I was no longer a startup entrepreneur. So I said, I'm now a Bitcoin educator. That's like a weird thing that is not a thing. It's not really a job, but because it was like a career day, right? I was like trying to explain my job. I'm like, I'm a Bitcoin educator, and apologies. Stop, please. There we go. The next year I came in and I said I'm a Bitcoin educator and I'm writing a book. And then the next year after that I said I've written a book and I'm starting a Bitcoin company. And then the year after that I said I run a Bitcoin company. So like this evolution of medium conviction into, I had a pretty high degree of conviction that Bitcoin was a thing, but as far as career risk, I think I had, I was a little bit, on the fence about like what would happen. And over the time of as those years went on and I studied Bitcoin more and more, I became more and more convinced that this is the most important thing I could be working on. It works. Other people are using it. Like, what the hell? I should be proud of it, right? And now, like, yeah, I run a Bitcoin company. And it's a lot more normal now to say that, but before that, still people look at you sideways a little bit. But in 2017, 2016, it certainly was not normal. So I think the career risk is going away. At this point, it's very easy. There's tons of Bitcoin jobs out there. By the way, if anybody's looking for a job, there's a site called bitcoinerjobs.co. Bitcoin-only companies looking for people to do Bitcoin-only stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of jobs in Bitcoin now. It's a huge ecosystem. And actually, when I left Reverb, I spent a year consulting for a crypto blockchain company before I learned that Bitcoin was the way. And that was a really great educational opportunity because I figured out why Bitcoin was important, because it's not like any other crypto. But there's lots of paths to that. But I think these days the career risk is pretty minimal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so, definitely. I think it's in earlier years, I used to have to ask people, hey, do you know what Bitcoin is? I used to have to ask them that, like in 2013 and 14. Nowadays, you can generally assume people have at least heard of Bitcoin, and some people go even further, and they might look back on Bitcoin as, that's boomer coin, or that's old coin, I'm into some dog coin or whatever, that's the latest gambling token. But I think there's a lot more acceptance of this now, and so it's seen more like it's growing, and we're seeing more and more large institutions and banks. So in Australia, the biggest bank, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, I used to work at that bank, they recently came out saying, yeah, we're going to let our customers buy, hold, and sell Bitcoin in the app, in their banking app, right? So to put that in terms for you guys, it would be like if Chase came out and let you buy Bitcoin in the app, right? It's like crazy to think how far things have come. in terms of mainstream understanding, adoption, awareness. We're now seeing sports stars advertising Bitcoin, Max Verstappen of Red Bull and Aaron Rodgers talking about Bitcoin and Cash App and different ways to get into Bitcoin. So I think it's just such a funny thing to see like this kind of mainstream awakening or awareness of Bitcoin. So do you have any thoughts where that's going over the next, say, year or so?
I think we came out of a very interesting year where a lot of people had just more time to themselves, being locked up and maybe not going into work as much, and maybe had more opportunities to study things. And I certainly think that created a large awakening. We also have, of course, the environment of money printing and all that kind of stuff that also created that awakening. And people asking questions like, if they can just print all this money, why are we paying taxes? Like, these questions are now like on Twitter every day, right? So I think that this last year created this environment of extreme awareness. But we also had these cycles. I mean, 2017, Bitcoin was plastered all over every media publication, but I think a much smaller number of people were actually buying it. There was a very small number of people driving up the price, and it was a massive sort of hysteria. It's not what it feels like today. I mean, with us spending weeks at 50,000, weeks at 60,000, like it's a very different environment. It's much more about, like everybody has figured out that Bitcoin is important, and now they're just scrambling to figure out how the hell they're going to get into it. Because especially if you're a corporation, you're trying to buy in size, it's not really that trivial. Then you have to answer all these questions. What's the governance like? How are we going to custody this? Who's going to be responsible if this goes, sideways? These are questions that like corporations are asking. But the nice thing is that for us individuals and for our friends, we don't really have to answer those questions. We just go out and buy Bitcoin, right? Get the Swan, get whatever. I don't care if you use my app or not. Just get some Bitcoin, right? So the point is that I think over the next year, we're going to see a much more sort of slow, we're probably going to see another crazy hype cycle, of course, but I think the general idea of slow adoption is actually happening now. We see the first countries dipping their toes. We see corporations dipping their toes. So this like cascading effect has started, and it feels much better than what was going on in 2017 or even in 2013, which was my first hype cycle that I was exposed to, which was really very payment focused. It was like, this Overstock is accepting Bitcoin payments, or this company is accepting Bitcoin payments. That was the wrong narrative for the wrong time, and so like it fizzled out, right? But I think now in 2021, we have a very different narrative, and I don't think it's going to fizzle out. The narrative is that our money is being debased, we need to save it, and Bitcoin is the best savings technology on the planet. So pretty much the answer is, the question is just how to get into it. So I think we're going to see a longer and a more realistic adoption cycle. We'll probably see some hype cycles, take us up to 100, 200K, and people will go crazy, and there will be a dump, and the whole cycle will repeat, and there will be people screaming, Bitcoin's going to crash to zero all over every publication. But, those of us who have been around for 5 or 6 or 7 of these cycles know that, every time it goes to zero, and then somehow it doesn't. So,
Yeah. Yeah, all right. So soon we're going to open it up for questions. So think of any questions you've got for Yan or myself. But yeah, just to touch on what you were saying there, Yan, it reminds me of there's like that Battlestar Galactica thing. It's like all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again. So you'll see these crazy, crazy hype cycles up. You'll see these crazy runs down. They'll come out saying, oh no, Bitcoin is dead. And you'll see China ban Bitcoin again for the 20th time. Yeah, they'll ban. I mean, I heard the latest actually on China is that they might be looking to unban it. So who knows? They might unban it and then ban it again. Don't worry. So some of these things are you have to just sort of take it in your stride. And the way I've experienced Bitcoin over my, 8.5, almost 9 years now, is think of it like it's like a dance. There's a 2 steps forward, 1 step back dance going on. So El Salvador might come out and say legal tender. Bitcoin is legal tender. And then some other, China will ban the Bitcoin mining. And then someone else will come out saying, oh, you can buy Bitcoin with us now. And it'll just be this sort of up and down effect, but steadily growing and growing and growing. So I think that's the other aspect as well, because you mentioned how a lot of people might have seen the ads for Bitcoin, but not actually looked into it. They might have thought, Bitcoin, I've never really looked into that, or maybe I'm not really a financial sort of person. Why should they care? Why should they stop and spend some time to actually stop skimming the surface and really dive deep?
I think, again, this goes back to, is it really solving a problem for them? And I think, again, it is challenging with Americans and people who are wealthy and so on. They have money, they're fine, they're not going to be poor in any sense of the word. It's tough. But I think that selling the idea that money is fundamentally broken and showing people that there has been a stepwise change in how money works, like in the last year. First of all, in the amount of it, but also in how governments and corporations that are thinking about money, right? You have attempts like Facebook Libra, corporate money. You have governments that are looking at creating CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, where the primary selling factor of those currencies is like, A, we're going to surveil the hell out of you, and B, negative interest rates. You want to not spend your money? Oh, great. Well, we're just going to have it like tick down. We're just going to flip a button, and all of a sudden your money will start disappearing unless you spend it. So that right now sounds like a crazy tinfoil conspiracy theory thing, but I can show you presentations from multiple banks that have literally come out and said, this is the benefits of us researching CBDCs. We want to have full control. We're going to have better financial surveillance, which of course is in the name of fighting terrorism. Let's not, get down to that hole where we realize that like AML and KYC, none of these laws actually work, but whatever. It's for fighting terrorism, so it's good. And then secondly, we're going to stimulate the economy, right? We're going to force people to spend their money. We're going to make sure that it disappears, the value will disappear if it's in your bank account. Multiple banks have come out and said this. And people need to be aware of this because that is your only other option. It's either Bitcoin, it's open source, it's yours, and nobody can mess with it, or it's central bank currency or corporate currency, most likely central bank, that's the more realistic one. But in either case, that's going to be your money, right? And you're going to give the power to the government of complete censorship, complete control. And, again, here in America, land of the free, quote unquote, we think that's not a thing. We think it's never going to happen. But you literally have these people telling you it's going to happen. They're putting out presentations internally, externally. Go and research any major bank and type in CBDC and look at their presentations. They all want this, so it's happening. So that's the choice that we're going to make, and we want to live in a free society. It's not just about, oh, will they ever use this power? Will they ever do like the Soviet Union and only tell us we can exchange $100? It's not a question of whether they will use that power. It's a question of whether even having that button is something we want as a society. And my answer is a resounding hell no. We do not want somebody with a button that says you can or cannot take your money with you when you want to leave, or that you can only exchange a certain amount, or that we will tax you 90% of your value unless you spend it. Like, we don't want this kind of environment. So money shapes society. Money is the coordination function of society. We have to have good money to coordinate our society. And if we want to have a prosperous society and a community, then we need to have money that supports that. And so it's a tough sell, but that's the story we've got to tell. And whoever has the eyes to see, the ears to hear, like if they look at the stuff, it's out there. It's not hidden. It's not obscured. It's not conspiracy theory. It's spelled out. People are just letting it happen, which is very sad.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think that is that question of freedom. And do you value freedom for its own sake, as opposed to just purely this technocratic vision of society that, oh, we'll make it better for you, just give us all the control and power over your lives. And you won't get to control what you do with your own money, how you spend it, what you do with your property. And so that's really this idea of open source money. And we talk about this idea of it being a permissionless system. Anyone can download a wallet on their phone. It'll give you 12 words. And if you were pressed, you could receive Bitcoin into an address controlled by those 12 seed words. And you could memorize those 12 words and walk across the border. That's the nuclear option. That's what Bitcoin does. It gives you that power that you could just up and leave if things got bad enough. And so that's, at the end of the day, that's one of the things Bitcoin gives you, and it also just gives you the ability to just participate in normal commerce if you want. You can set up BTC Pay merchant processing, or you can use, say, an open node as an example. There's lots of ways that you can get involved and do this stuff and get more into it. You can sell services and products for Bitcoin. You can buy Bitcoin. You can mine Bitcoin. There's all different ways you can get involved. So, do you have any other thoughts on how people can get involved if they want to sort of learn more about Bitcoin, just generally?
I definitely would recommend getting on Twitter. I feel like a lot of people are hesitant about Twitter because they thought, Twitter has been, I think, think, unfairly labeled as like this place where people just go and put garbage up. But there's actually a really good community, and there is a lot of really good interaction there. There's a lot of thoughtful interaction. There's a lot of conversations you can have with people who wouldn't respond to your email, and you can have conversations with anybody in Bitcoin practically on any topic, and even outside of Bitcoin. I think it's just a great place to learn. So I really encourage everybody to go up there. If you don't have a Twitter account, or you have one and you haven't used it and you don't know who to follow, I actually have a list called bitcoinerlist.com. If you go there, it's like a curated list. It's about 100 people that I think are awesome. If you follow those people, it's an entry, it's like a portal. Stephan is on that list, obviously. But it's like a portal into the world of Bitcoin. So once you start to follow those people, you'll get a good sense of what else is out there. And there's an endless amount of information out there. So I think that's a good way to start to filter, and spend 5 minutes a day on it. It's not a huge time commitment, and pretty soon you won't be able to put your phone down, so that's its own problem. But but nonetheless, I think it's important because it's a place where conversation happens, and it's a place where new developments happen. So I recommend looking into that. And I wanted to just touch on one thing, which is that I did used to talk a lot about, and I still talk a lot about Bitcoin as an option to leave a country, but I don't want to sound like a tinfoil hat person when I do this, and it's very hard to, like, when you talk to, again, Americans who think, or even like my friends who are Russian immigrants in America, who think, we came here, this is the land of the free, we're not going to leave, America's fine, right? To not oversell the point of, it's not about leaving, it's not about having the option to leave, which is, of course, it's good to have that option, but it's the very fact that you have that option that will make society better, right? The very fact that you have the option to leave makes your government better. It makes them work for you instead of the other way around, right? In the Soviet Union, you had no option to leave. So you did whatever you were told because, like, that was your only option. You couldn't leave. So just having that option shapes society. And I think that's a really, really critical point. It's not about us actually thinking that the United States is going to turn into, say, Australia, to pick like a totalitarian state. No, but I'm kind of facetious about it. But seriously, I don't really think America's headed that way. I think there's a way to save it, and the way is Bitcoin. So that's why I Bitcoin, because I love this country. I would like to stay here. I don't want to leave. So having that option is really all about how we shape society. It's not so much about saying screw you. Oh, I'm going to just get out of here because I don't like it here anymore.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think we'll probably got some time for questions, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. If you guys have questions, put your hand up and maybe shout it out, and I'll repeat the question just for the stream.
What happens when the government says, well, the only people who want Bitcoin are terrorists, so you can buy and sell Bitcoin, but just keep it on the exchanges?
Yeah. Okay, so just for the stream, the question is, what happens if the government says Bitcoin is only for terrorists, therefore if you want it, buy it, and just only hold it on exchanges?
Well, first of all, there are ways to buy Bitcoin that are not exchanges. So there's peer-to-peer exchange, which there's like BISC, there's local Bitcoins. So there's places where you can meet up with somebody and exchange Bitcoin in person or over the internet. So the existence of those things, and yes, they can be shut down to some degree, but they're pretty decentralized. So the very existence of those things means there's always going to be a black market. And you can see this in countries like China, where it's literally banned, but there are people in China buying Bitcoin. I guarantee you that. So there's always a black market, and I think one of the interesting things is if you study the black markets of currencies in general over the history, of the world, there's a great article by, I want to call it, I think it's called something with a W. I'll find it later and I'll share it out, but it's an article by a hedge fund that did research on black market currencies, and basically what happens when governments try to restrict the exchange value of the currency, and then the black market essentially overpowered them. Like it was so prevalent that the government had to capitulate and actually, lower the value of the currency to what the black market was trading it at. And eventually, most of these governments fell in some fashion. The Soviet Union is an example of that too. Very strong black market economy in the Soviet Union, where it was illegal to own dollars, yet people had dollars. So people have ways of going around, the system. So whenever you create that kind of level of draconian control, all you're really saying is, A, we're afraid of this thing enough to try to make it legal, and B, you're driving up the value of it. So now you're creating incentives for people to create black market operations. If you need an example of this, in Argentina, I visited in 2008, there's a street called Florida Street or Florida Street, where you go, and it's a black market exchange, and it's completely open air. Everybody's saying cambio, 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 and you can buy and sell dollars at black market rates. Totally illegal, totally in the open. It's just impossible to control these things, right? Because there's what the market wants, the market will get, one way or another, right? So I'm not particularly worried about the government coming down and doing that kind of crackdown. They've said they're not interested in cracking down on Bitcoin. I actually think the government has been pretty open to it. I mean, they have their own biases and their own craziness, and they have to work through that, and I get that. But they allowed the internet to happen, right? And the internet is also for terrorists, and it's also for everybody else, and it also, is for child pornographers. But, by and large, the internet is a huge net positive to society, and I think that Bitcoin is that as well. And at the end of the day is, if they shut down the exchanges, it's like, this is an Andreas Antonopoulos quote. He said, if you shut down the on-ramps, we're just going to stay on the highway, right? Like, that's what happens. Those of us who have Bitcoin, we're going to find ways to create Bitcoin circular economies, Bitcoin-denominated goods and services, and we don't need the on-ramps anymore. So that's what it is.
Excellent. Any other questions out there? Yep.
So along those lines, kind of building on the back of that, do you think, or I guess, what are your guys' opinions on, I think the U.S. government knows that, what you were saying. They're not that stupid.
Right.
Well, we can argue. So do you see the U.S. government continuing to operate some sort of parallel fiat world, some sort of CBDC derivative based on Bitcoin, where banks are issuing their own currencies, or even central banks issuing their own currency backed by Bitcoin, or maybe even gold at some point? I have just your thoughts.
Yeah. So just for the stream, the question is, do you see the US government or governments doing some kind of fiat or CBDC backed by Bitcoin or backed by gold? Yeah. Oh, well. Well, yeah, sure. So I think some of them might try this, but I just think it all just comes down to that same question, how much trust do you have in the system? And those people who really trust the system will be like, oh, okay, I'll just use that. But then there'll be all these people out there who don't trust that. And I think the fundamental difference now is that you can hold your coins really easily. You can just get it on a phone. You can use the Lightning Network. It's just so easy to just use Bitcoin natively now that it's almost like there's not that much reason to not do that, in my view. But I say that as someone who's very deep into the game and have used Bitcoin myself for a long time. So maybe a newer person to this world might think a little differently. So yeah, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think, we want to try to say, okay, Bitcoin is going to bring down governments. I probably have a more cynical view in that. I mean, the United States is, it's a very powerful country with a lot of war power and Navy ships and all that, and the oil trade, and all of that will probably continue to exist for a very long time, right? We are a pretty big empire, and we have that empire to protect, and regardless of what's happening to the money, that's not going to necessarily go away. So, I mean, I see it more like, what does Bitcoin bring to people who hold it? And the answer is wealth and store value and all that, right? So the government, too, needs a way to store its value, right? And we're already seeing corporations do it. So, we got Saylor, he's issuing debt, he's buying Bitcoin, he's putting it on his balance sheet. His corporation is doing really, really well. By extension, the government might also look at it that way, like the government of El Salvador is doing, and they're saying, okay, we're going to take Bitcoin remittances, we're going to keep some of that Bitcoin, that's our new wealth, right? As Bitcoin goes up in value, their wealth goes up. Now they're building schools with their Bitcoin. The way I see it is there's kind of this game theory playing out where some other government's going to look at El Salvador and say, they're doing really well. They have this Bitcoin stash. It's valued, at it has a lot of value. They can take loans. They can build infrastructure with this Bitcoin. Why shouldn't we do the same, right? And maybe the United States will be last in that whole game because they don't really have that need. They print the world's reserve currency currently as it stands, and they may well continue to do so for the next 50 years or 100 years, or maybe longer, right? I don't know. I have no predictive power. I'm like a Bitcoin cynic in that regard, and some people think hyperbitcoinization tomorrow, but I think it's a generational thing. I think that the United States is not going to give up its power that easy, but I do think a lot of governments all over the world are just going to see, hey, there's a benefit to us having some Bitcoin, just like they used to say there's a benefit to holding gold. Even though the gold standard is over, every central bank has some gold. Why do they have it if the gold standard is over, right? Because they see some value in it as a hedge to everything else. So I see that kind of parallel system developing where fiat currencies sort of coexist for a bit. Maybe they replace, like in El Salvador, they are on the dollar, so they don't have their own currency. So for them, it's like, should we use this other foreign currency or this open source foreign currency? They're both foreign, they're both not ours, but at least one of them is not under control of anybody and the other one's under control of the United States. So I think we're going to see countries make that choice, which will probably make the dollar suffer a bit. And eventually the United States will have to also acquire some Bitcoin or they're going to be left behind.
Yeah. Yeah, and it would be important to point out that that itself would be a capitulation, right?
Yeah.
That if the central banks of the central banks around the world all started holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet openly, then that would be a capitulation, and obviously it would pump all of our bags. But it would be, it would. But I think I think in the interim they could well do this kind of CBDC backed with a little bit of, and maybe they've got a basket and Bitcoin is part of that basket. I could certainly see that happening. I just think longer term, I think everyone would just go natively to Bitcoin if they can. So, yeah. Question at the back, orange shirt, yeah.
Yeah, so since we're only a block away from the CME, I had to ask this question to the experts here. So what really prevents the, say, Wall Street and the futures markets, ETFs markets from rehypothecating a lot of the Bitcoin and making synthetic Bitcoin and thus artificially suppressing the price?
Yeah.
Do you think that's a threat, or do you think the 10-minute block time will blow a lot of those trades out of the water?
Right. So the question is, would the Wall Streetization or the financialization of Bitcoin and the use of synthetics create a market where there's more paper Bitcoin than there are real Bitcoin, or how would it interact with actually Bitcoin on-chain people who are using the system natively?
I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not a trader or know a lot about that side of things, but I'm going to play it from like a game theory standpoint of what's possible with Bitcoin. And that is, sure, like, of course, you can trade, anything, right? You can trade some fake rehypothecated derivative thing, but Bitcoin has real world use. And this is what it comes down to, that there is actual Bitcoin. It actually exists on chain. It's very easy to take custody of. And despite of what the traders may want, there are real-world needs for Bitcoin, right? Real-world demand for actual on-chain Bitcoin, actual Lightning Bitcoin that exists out in the world, right? So I think that pulls a lot of that float that would normally be traded out into the world. And, I mean, you can only really kind of sustain fake pricing for so long when it's so easy to take the underlying custody, right? If somebody wants delivery, they're going to get it. It's very easy to do. So I also probably see that there's going to be regulation that will say that these things have to be, you have to, at some point, demonstrate that it's deliverable. I don't know how that impacts pricing, but I just think the real-world usage, because all the examples you pointed out, like gold or whatever, like nobody really uses gold in the real world, right? For the most part, it's either sitting in a vault or it's being traded as paper in an ETF. So it's not exactly analogous to Bitcoin, where there is actually real-world Bitcoin flying around all the time on the chain in Lightning, and you can see it and you can monitor and you can audit it in real time. So I think that changes the game quite a lot for being able to financialize and trade something that's completely disconnected to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with Jan, and I would definitely, I think, just to reiterate that point, that's, in my view, one of the fundamental differences with Bitcoin and gold is that you can more easily self-custody it, and I think that is just going to fundamentally change. And so a really good speaker on this is Caitlin Long. She's spoken a lot about rehypothecation. I've interviewed her a couple times on my show, so you'll probably enjoy those episodes because we talk about rehypothecation. But I think the fundamental, at the end of the day, when you break it down, it's just so much easier to claim it on-chain and use it natively, such that enough people will do that. And also, let's remember, historically, how did we end up here? It was with fiat legal tender laws. And now what do those legal tender laws force us to do? It's they force us to treat the IOUs of different banks as being the same thing. They force us with the law. But in a world of Bitcoin, and in an international world, I just don't see that they would be able to force us to, say, value, all of us to value the JP Morgan IOU the same as the, some other, Wells Fargo IOU as this other IOU of Bitcoin. That's part of what the current system uses right now. They force us to value all of these things the same. When in reality, we would look at these different banks and be like, okay, I think Bank A is more solvent than Bank B. I'm going to value Bank A better than Bank B. And if we think historically, remember what happened with Mt. Gox. So with Mt. Gox, we saw that the value of the coins in Mt. Gox at the time it was going through that event, that was different to the value of real Bitcoins out in the market. So I think it's going to be a similar dynamic there, that if there are questions or concerns about, oh, I think this service is rehypothecating, there'll be a bank run there. There'll be all these people who pull their coins out, and then they'll get wrecked, basically, is the short answer. So hopefully that helps. Anyone else with a question? Yep.
Yeah, so we kind of touched on hyperbitcoinization a little bit, but I think we're sort of in the beginning of the suddenly phase of the S-curve adoption. I'd love to get your perspectives on like what markers or signals you're looking for that to sort of signal that we are in hyperbitcoinization. Is it like a percentage of the global world population that's holding Bitcoin? Is it a number of nation states that have it, similar to El Salvador's their currency? I mean, obviously you touched on the Fed aspect, but or maybe it's a confluence of those. I'd love to hear you expand on that perspective a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So just for the stream, the question is, what are the key factors of hyper-Bitcoinization, and how would we know whether we've hit the suddenly part of the gradually then suddenly? Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah? Okay. So this is highly subjective, i.e. I'm just pulling this number out. I just think we are not there yet. It just to me, as I look out at the world, as I look out at people, people walking on the street, are these people ready to go full Bitcoin? No, I don't see it. Not this cycle, not this time. I see it like we're just not there. I see it like we're going to get a crazy momentum. Like I think it's going to make 2017 look like nothing. It'll be like, I really think it'll be like 10 to 100x the craziness of 2017 when it's really going. But I think it will fundamentally crash because we're just very momentum based. Our human tendency is to chase the momentum. We see something going up and we're super bullish, and then we see it going down, we're super bearish. And I think that's what we're going to see over this kind of cycle. In terms of what would I look for, I would look for a few signs. I'd point you as well to an episode I did with on Zimbabwe hyperinflation, because they talk. So it was based on this book called When Money Destroys Nations, and so the guests were Russ Lamberti and Philip Haslam. And so in that book, they explain gorge moments. Now, there were certain gorge moments on the path to hyperinflation in Zimbabwe. Now, obviously, the US is a different case to Zimbabwe, so it's not 100% translatable, but there are some interesting signs. So, for example, shops having trouble changing the prices, which maybe that's like an early indicator we're seeing. We saw credit tighten up. Banks were no longer able to give loans, right? Anyone who had money would purchase assets that were hard or try to take out loans if they could, because obviously at the time of a high inflation environment, it's in your advantage. If you can't access Bitcoin, you should access loans. And obviously the Michael Saylors and Pierre Richards of the world are getting loans to buy Bitcoin, but nevertheless, the point stands, credit systems tend to freeze up in those high inflationary environments because banks can't make their ends meet because they're getting inflated away. Their NIM, net interest margin, is getting crushed. So that's another thing I would look for. You'll start to see headlines about, Preston Pish and I did an episode called The Final Cycle. And so he mentioned this idea that you'll start to see headlines. Oh, is this going to be the dollar killer, right? Just like every year you'll see a new phone come out and they'll say, oh, is this the iPhone killer, right? It's sort of like, but people will start asking that question in earnest about Bitcoin. So those are a few ideas, but personally, I don't think it's this cycle. I think it'll probably be mid or late this decade, would be my, if I had to, honestly, I think it's more towards the end of this decade, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, and I would also add that I think there's a user experience bridge that we haven't crossed yet. So, like, if I was to show a Bitcoin wallet to somebody on the street, will they get it immediately? Will they, install it and get it, and then now they're into Bitcoin? I don't think we're there yet either. So problems like self-custody, problems like just the general user experience of wallets, even so far as like onboarding into Bitcoin is kind of difficult, and it's partially because of the stupid laws in this country. But for example, you need to show, your ID and your face and like all this KYC stuff, which is really, really onerous to a lot of people. That prevents buying Bitcoin, right? Like if we're really realistic about it, that prevents a lot of people from going and setting up an account at something like Swan, where we say, okay, scan your ID. Why should I give you my ID to a website? Well, because the government's making us do it. We don't like it any more than you do. But the reality is a lot of people are put off by that. So I think we need more ways to earn Bitcoin, more ways, people will be mining Bitcoin at home. There's a lot of cool devices coming out for that. People will be earning Bitcoin by doing various gigs and things online. So as that economy spins up more and Bitcoin permeates more, that's, I think, when we start to get there, because we're just, right now, look at the size of this room. I mean, it's not very big. And, Stephan Livera is a pretty awesome dude. So what's going on here? Why isn't half of Chicago in this room, right? And the answer is because the Bitcoin community is pretty small. We all know each other by name of the podcasters and authors that are out there. There's maybe hundreds of us. There's definitely not thousands. There's not millions. So until we get to that point, I think there's a cultural shift that hasn't happened. There's a UX shift that hasn't happened. Yeah, I agree. Late this decade, at minimum for me. I always thought it's going to be like, a generational thing. So people growing up natively with Bitcoin as their first money. Do they have a Bitcoin savings account when they're 5 years old? That kind of thing. My kids don't even have that yet because I don't have a good way to do it. Like, I just don't see a good product out there to give them a Bitcoin piggy bank. I know there's BitPiggies and stuff like that, but the user experience is just not there. So maybe their kids,
Yeah, I think I think of it as like settling in for the long haul, right? Strap in. It's going to be a long time, but the benefit is you get more time to stack sats cheaply. So that's the positive side. Any other questions, guys, or shall we? One up the back there.
How do you feel about services like compass mining as a means to dollar cost average?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, how do you feel about compass mining as a way to dollar cost average?
I don't really know them, so I'm
Yeah.
not,
Yeah, well, I mean, compass mining are one way. Of course, there's a spectrum, right? The most self-sovereign way is your own miner in your own home. Now, you can purchase mining, and actually, I think they do offer that also, but you just have to think about, okay, heat, noise, getting the power, getting the voltage stuff sorted. I think you also have to think about, okay, where do you think the price is going over the next few years? Where do you think the hash rate is going over the next few years? If you think both of those things are going north, well, there are various mining profitability calculators as well. That's worth playing around with some of those and just having an estimate of where you think the price is going and the hash rate is going, and also what is the useful life of the machine you're buying. Do you think it will go for 5 years, as an example? So I think these are options, but you just have to be willing to deal with certain trade-offs, right? Heat, noise, power, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing about mining is that, a lot of people in mining are very professional, very high expense, OpEx, CapEx. I mean, they're putting millions of dollars in it, so you're competing with them. And in certain environments, you can be profitable. I mean, if you're doing Compass and you're finding cheap power and, you're getting your ASICs pretty cheap, you might be okay. And if the price does well, you might be okay. And I think mining is a great way to get, quote unquote KYC-free coins. Like they're your coins. You didn't have to show your face to anybody, and that's great. But it is a challenging way. It's challenging to be profitable because you are going up against players. Mining is extremely competitive. You're going against public companies that are raising hundreds of millions of debt and just going at it and buying ASICs by the hundreds of thousands. So, I think most people will probably not do super well unless you've really discovered a source of really cheap energy and, you can do it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, to be fair, there might be some people who think, hey, I'm not economically mining them. I'm doing it because I want the KYC free and I'm willing to pay that premium. And I just treat it like this is my way of getting non-KYC coins. Because I think you can have both. You can have some KYC coins and some non. So I think that's one way I think that's a legitimate approach. So yeah. Anyone else? Yep.
Yeah, do you see any issues if Bitcoin doesn't do smart contracts fast enough?
So the question is around Bitcoin and doing smart contracts. Is that going to be an issue? Do you want to touch on this one, or do you want me to? Yeah.
Well, Bitcoin has smart contracts. A lot of people don't think it does, but it does have, things like multi-sig and time locks and things like that. And Taproot's coming out, which is going to really unlock a lot of power there too. And I mean, I think a lot of people, when they talk about smart contracts, there's this DeFi craze going on, right? We can trade bananas and rocks now, and so that's great. And we can make a lot of money doing it. And there's all this desire, why don't we bring this to Bitcoin? But I think if you really look at the fundamentals of what's happening, what do people want out of these systems? They want a system that's fast, cheap, can't be front run. Those are the features of actually a centralized system, something like a stock exchange. It can be fast, cheap, it can be regulated, it can be audited, it can't be front run. So you get into this DeFi thing and you start to use smart contracts, you run into all sorts of problems, which the Ethereum ecosystem is finding out firsthand, as if like nobody tried to warn them that that was going to be problems. But they're problems every day, right? So I think that Bitcoin doesn't need these features for it to be successful. Bitcoin is first and foremost the money. The most important thing about it is that it's decentralized and it's immutable, and those characteristics have to be, they're sacrosanct, right? Everything else we get is like a cherry on top. So if we get some form of decentralized trading, great. If that form of decentralized trading is more like, 3 parties and one of them is trusted, also fine. I mean, there's versions of these things that work and that are actually realistic in real world scenarios where we're not trading, JPEGs of rocks. But again, I think Bitcoin takes a very slow and methodical approach to implementation. If you look at developer discussions in Bitcoin, they're always like, how could this possibly break it? Whereas other systems are like, how can we get this built faster, right? And that, how can we get this built faster, is really the path to getting wrecked. You see it all the time. You see smart contract blowups in Ethereum all the time. You see the security flaws, millions of dollars lost, hundreds of millions of dollars in certain cases. This is not the kind of system you want to move fast and break things. You're building essentially, it's not my metaphor, but somebody from Bitcoin Core, I think, said that you're building like a rocket ship, right? You're building a rocket. Once you launch it, it's in space. You're going to have very limited amounts of fixes you can do to an Apollo mission once it's already live. So you have audited the code, make sure everything's cool. And I think Bitcoin's approach to that and the way that it is approaching smart contracts is very smart and very intelligent with that way of building in mind, because it really is a rocket. Once we let it go, it's out in the world. We cannot have, there will never be a hard fork in Bitcoin. You can never have everybody in Bitcoin. Now there's hundreds of thousands of nodes all over the world. Try to coordinate an upgrade. It's impossible. So if you're going to have it as money, you can't have upgrades. So that means it's a rocket ship. You get the code right once, you ship it, and then you build layers.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's also worthwhile reading. There's an article by Alan Farrington you mentioned earlier, and Big Al. And I did an episode with Big Al as well, where we spoke about some of the material in that article. And basically they were talking about whether some of these things even have a reason to exist. Because in many cases, it's just leverage on top of leverage. And so they'll say, oh, look at the TVL, the total value locked. But really, it's like someone's taken a loan, rehypothecated here, and put it there. And there's no connection to productivity. Rather than with Bitcoin, there doesn't need to be a connection to productivity. It's money. It's what we save. We save to deal with our future uncertainty. And so Bitcoin doesn't necessarily need a connection to future productivity in that sense, whereas these utility coins do. And so there's a fundamental issue there. So that's also worth reading or listening if you're interested. And I think also the episode I did with Alex B, talking about decentralization pressure in Ethereum, is also well worth looking at, because he's explaining the dynamic there of MEV, miner extracted value, and staking derivatives causing this centralization that will eventually create a politicization of the project of Ethereum. So,
What do you mean by eventually?
yeah, exactly. Any other questions?
So you were talking about like user interface being an issue on onboarding. I'd love to get both your perspectives on unit bias, right? I think we've all probably experienced people who have said like, oh, I can't get into Bitcoin, it's too expensive, or I've already missed the run up. We all know it as NGU technology, right? So I guess my perspective is if all the smart money's waking up, especially with like Boss's perspective of like the credit markets are like $400 trillion market that's going to be coming in here eventually. Let's say probably by the next or 2018 or 2028 halving cycle, like absolutely. Don't you think that to get like the plebs on board, right, the common folk, we need the unit bias is playing a big aspect of that, and like if we denominate in sats, people will not have that unit bias. I don't know. That was kind of a rambling.
Yeah, sure.
I think you understand.
Yeah, so the question, as I understand it, is basically thoughts around unit bias, and will the current use of the Bitcoin denomination as opposed to sats, satoshis, will that hinder pleb adoption or retail level adoption of Bitcoin, basically? Yeah.
So I have like a different perspective on this than, there's a lot of Bitcoiners pushing for sats, and I think sats are wonderful, but they do create a point of friction. So you're trying to introduce somebody to Bitcoin, you first say, okay, there's Bitcoin, there's 21 million of them, but they can be subdivided into 100 million units, which are called sats. Now you've introduced two different concepts, two different very large numbers, or you could say there's 2.1 quadrillion sats, which sounds just completely ridiculous. So try to explain that to somebody. There's 2.1 quadrillion of these. That doesn't sound scarce at all. So you're creating all kinds of problems when you explain it that way, in my opinion at least. So what I've started doing, and I think is working, is I actually focus on the total market value of Bitcoin, which right now is about $1.3 trillion. So you say, Bitcoin is a network, it's worth $1.3 trillion. That does two things. First of all, holy shit, that's a lot of money, okay? It's a lot of value. Why? Why is it so valuable? That's a good question to ask. And the second thing it does is it makes it really obvious. Like, you're obviously not going to buy $1.3 trillion. Obviously, nobody has $1.3 trillion. So there's no longer a question of, like, can I afford one Bitcoin? Because if you tell somebody Bitcoin's worth $67,000, that's an arbitrary number to them. It's like, in relation to what? $67,000 sounds like a lot. It's like more than a car. Why would I pay that much for a Bitcoin, right? Doesn't make any sense. But when you say it as a network, it's a $1.3 trillion network. It's more valuable than, it's almost as valuable as silver at this point. It's more valuable than Tesla. Why is it so valuable? Well, a lot of people are finding it valuable. You know, it's censorship resistant sound money, and you go into that whole thing, right? And the second question is, okay, how can I buy some? You can buy as much as you want, no problem, right? Because it's 1.3 trillion, you get the idea that you're not going to buy 1.3 trillion of it. So right away, it's how can I buy some? So I think you eliminate the unit bias of Bitcoin, and you create the sense that it's very valuable at the same time. And I'm really trying this out. It's like something I've been trying for the last year, especially in my Facebook discussions and people who are like really stuck, to really be like, hey, this thing is super valuable. You need to understand why. I do think it sparks more interesting conversations than talking about sats, because sats creates more complexity. I think once they get into Bitcoin, then it's all about sats. Like, they understand Bitcoin, they bought some, then it's like, okay, go to the Lightning Network. You can send sats, you can spend 500 sats. It's a really small unit of Bitcoin. That's like the second thing you explain after they've already gotten into it. But I don't think it's a good entry point. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
People understand pennies.
They do, but it's like, it's 100 pennies to $1 versus 100 million to 21 million. It's like,
How many dollars are there? Yeah, so I think Jan's got a really good take on the unit bias question. I think it's just, you try to explain the total market of Bitcoin, but honestly, some people are just not going to get it, and you try to help them, but they'll get it when they get it, you know? So I think that's probably a good spot to finish up here, and we can have a mingling session just out here in the kitchen area. So I guess we'll wrap this one up. So make sure you follow Yan on Twitter, SKWP on Twitter. And also check out his book, Inventing Bitcoin. We've got a few copies of that, so maybe Yan will do a book signing for those of you interested. And yeah, you can check out Swan at swan.com. Find me online, stephanlivera.com. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it.